Hello, this is CJ Kilmer of the Dangerous History Podcast. There are many reasons to be anti-war. Many good reasons. One of them is that the wars are always based mostly, if not entirely, on lies. But an even better reason to be anti-war is that in most wars throughout all of human history, the majority of the people who are killed are just random civilians. They're non-combatants. They're people whose only sin is happening to live in an unlucky time and place, and one way or another being casualties of the war. And this is especially true of what we might call world wars, wars between multiple combinations of great powers. World War II is the worst example so far in history. And interestingly, World War II is the war that the American establishment loves to put on a pedestal and to praise as the good war and the one war that everybody has to support retroactively as a noble crusade. And wasn't it a great thing? The reality is that World War II was an unmitigated disaster and bloodbath. And as with all wars, well, I should say almost all wars in human history, but even more so, the vast majority of the people who died in World War II were civilians. Now, Americans are largely blind to this, and that's mostly because World War II really didn't touch the United States directly that much at all. Not on the level that it did, say, touch people in the Soviet Union, China, Germany, Poland, Japan, or even France or Britain. A tiny percentage of the military deaths in World War II were American. That's the truth. So we'll never have really hard, reliable numbers on the death tolls of World War II because, as you might expect, when entire cities are getting firebombed into rubble and things like that, sometimes the best records aren't always kept. And even if they are, they might get hit by, an incendiary bomb next week or something. So there'll never be 100% accurate, foolproof numbers about World War II deaths. But in World War II, the United States lost approximately 300,000 military personnel. Now that might sound like a lot. It's, 5 Vietnams as far as American casualties are concerned, but the Soviets, by contrast, lost at least about 13 million soldiers in World War II. So that's, 40 times as many? Germany lost over 3 million soldiers in World War II. Japan lost at least 1.5 million soldiers in World War II. Even Poland lost 850,000, so almost 3 times as many soldiers as the United States lost in World War II. China, a country whose participation in World War II most Americans are almost entirely ignorant of. China lost over 1.3 million soldiers in World War II, which, is over 4 times as many soldiers as the U.S. lost. So even when it comes to military deaths, the United States really doesn't have anything anywhere close to what most of the other major contenders in World War II experienced in military deaths. And in civilian deaths, the imbalance is even more ridiculous because statistically, the United States lost almost no civilians in World War II. Yes, there were a very small number who were killed in the Pearl Harbor attacks, but the reality is that the vast majority of those killed in the Pearl Harbor attacks by Japan were military personnel because those were military facilities that were being attacked. And other than that, and if I recall, maybe a handful of American civilians might have been killed in the brief Japanese occupation of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. And, small numbers of Americans killed who were sailor civilians killed on the high seas by, enemy submarines and whatever like that. But the reality is that statistically speaking, virtually none of the civilians killed in World War II were American. The overwhelming majority were from Europe and Asia. And the reality is, too, that as horrible as World War II was from the perspective of military deaths, it was even worse from the perspective of civilian deaths. So you can find lots of different figures and estimates done by people using different methodologies to try to reconstruct forensically who died as a result of World War II. Again, records were not always kept very well, and even when they were often damaged, lost, or destroyed. But common estimates for military deaths overall in World War II are approximately 15 million to perhaps as high as 25 million or so. Let's take the middle ground of that and say that that's accurate. Say 20 million is roughly what the number of military killed in World War II was. That means that of 20 million dead soldiers in World War II, only about 300,000 were Americans. But the civilian side of the death toll is much worse, because the civilian dead in World War II are believed, again, depending on whose numbers you consult, to run from 30 million to perhaps as high as 60 million civilians. Okay? So these are numbers that are hard to even wrap your head around, especially if you're American and you were, of all of the major contenders in World War II, the country that experienced by far the fewest civilian deaths, by far the fewest destruction of, your home territory and cities and infrastructure and facilities and everything like this. It's hard to wrap your head around what World War II really was, not only because most of the people who lived through it are gone by now, but also because most Americans, just our national memory has no comprehension of what it was like to live through this war and just be a random civilian in Russia or China or Germany or Poland or Japan or Yugoslavia or any of, dozens of other countries that suffered far more civilian deaths in World War II than the U.S. did. Somewhere between 30 and 60 million civilians died in World War II. So the next time you hear some war hawk very flippantly talking about going to war with Russia and or China, keep that in mind. And, the United States, due to luck of geography and a few other things, ended up suffering, statistically speaking, very little at all from World War II. No guarantees that World War III won't see the chickens come home to roost. And keep in mind this, that there were no H-bombs for World War II. There were no H-bombs. There weren't even A-bombs until the very end, and only 2 of them were used at the very end of the war. So this death toll of civilians of 30 to 60 million was almost entirely done with conventional weapons ranging from, small arms up to incendiary bombs and basic high explosive bombs. And only a tiny percentage at the end were caused by A-bombs. And A-bombs are pop guns compared to H-bombs. H-bombs are, something like 1,000 times as powerful as an A-bomb. An H-bomb uses an A-bomb as its detonator, as its primer to start it blowing up. H-bombs don't melt steel. H-bombs vaporize steel. H-bombs didn't exist to contribute to the 30 to 60 million civilians killed in World War II. H-bombs exist now, and the US and Russia each have thousands of them. So if World War was a disaster 80 years ago for just random average people in many parts of the world, World War now? It's hard to even wrap your head around just how horrific the death toll, which again would be overwhelmingly majority civilian, would end up being. And that's ultimately the biggest reason why I'm anti-war.